This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Very fine, thank you.
Good. We're very glad to have you in the Situation Room for the first time. Karibu Sana. We normally start the show with a proverb from a different African country. And Dennis will tell you who that is. And we'd love to get your interpretation of it.
We are in West Africa. The country is Benin, rich in cotton, the biggest producers of cotton in the continent. And this is the proverb that we get from Benin. The elder sees sitting down what the young person cannot see while standing up. How would you interpret that? What do you think the Benoit people are saying?
Oh, very nice. I think Africa and Ubuntu and our wisdom transcends generations.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a very big secret in Africa which everybody knows, that we get comfortable with uncomfortable things. So another one for you.
Yeah.
So basically, this, thank you for raising this. This particular issue about wisdom and age is at the cusp of being challenged. We are at the place of historic human evolution where, because of tech, AI, we are discounting the very fact, or we are at the risk of discounting the very fact that the wisdom is a function of age and number of years. In our HR lingo, we used to say that he's got 25 years of experience. No, he's got 1 year of experience multiplied by 25. And with redundant and outdated wisdom. But at the same time, I tell you one thing. There's a doctor in the city, I think it was in Thika, a new doctor. He was doing appendix operation. He was charging 3,000 shillings. I'm talking about 20 years back.
Yeah.
And there was an expert doctor charging 25,000 shillings. So the young entitled doctors say, hey, listen, this guy is charging too much. Okay, this guy is charging too much. So there was a gala night and a discussion going on. And the guy say, yes, it's a simple thing. We are just cutting off an organ, which is not required. And anybody can do it.
Yeah.
But it requires 25 years experience and wisdom to do or to know what to do when something goes wrong. And that's the difference between 22,000.
And 3,000.
Are we together?
Yeah.
We definitely are.
Yeah.
And so that maybe could lend to this conversation that we speak about this morning, because there are two things that are happening in the same conversation. There is technology, which is the currency of development in these times, and then there's also the issue of unemployment. Is there an engagement, betrothal between the two that essentially will bring them together and say, okay, one can be gotten rid of by the other? In this case, unemployment gotten rid of by technology. Is that the conversation that we're having right now?
Unfortunately, I would like to say, yes, we're having that conversation. And the more unfortunate is we don't know. We can't crystal ball gaze what's going to happen. Tech AI is definitely going to reduce and take away the redundant or monotonous work. But then I have good faith in human. We still would eat, we'll still would breathe, we'll still relate, and we will upgrade ourselves to a level. So Elon Musk said something at Davos, and I think he copied me, but I generally like to say this, that I would rather be an optimist and underperform, or then be a pessimist and perform. So I still am optimist that tech would solve many of our problems. Tech would take away and create, but there's always a hockey curve. It will get worse before we get better. In the immediate near future, tech would replace redundant, non-value-adding, irrelevant jobs, what I call is slop. Okay? Those activities would be reduced because tech would take over. And then, as humankind evolve, as they start leveraging this tech, and those who leverage it better would replace with those who do not leverage it at all.
What are non-relevant jobs, Favesh? You said irrelevant or non-relevant. What are those?
Very good question. So it's a relative concept, but basically, whatever can be delegated to the system without compromising the quality. Repetitive jobs. Okay, if you want to be totally precise, you can do the correction aspects, the editing aspects, the first drafts of any communication, review of huge document. Go to Notebook LLM, they would review miles and miles of documents into, thank you so much. Okay, miles and miles. I have a situation, so don't scream.
Don't worry about it. Go ahead.
Thank you. So miles and miles of documents that would be read, concised, into a summarized document. So those which were non-relevant or those could have been delegated to a system would become irrelevant.
But then again, one would ask the question that even as tech is coming in to replace the irrelevant and relevant jobs that are there, one asks the question, as a country and from a policy level, or even as companies, are we seeing intentional move to grasp these new phenomena? Are we investing in tech? Are we preparing our companies to uptake this new technology that is coming in? Or it's a question of let's wait and see?
I think, yes, companies are really embracing. At Safal Group, on 9 September, I think September last year or year before, we had our first conference on AI by an author of Virtual Economy Dynasty, Jeremy. I have been speaking on AI and digitalization conferences as early as 2023. I don't think Africa is ignoring it. Also, I would like to say that there's also a benefit of a late entrant. We don't have to climb the stairs. We can directly take the escalator to the 4th floor and learn from the mistakes of others if we are late entrant. So in any way, I would like to be an optimist and underperform rather than a pessimist and perform.
Okay. When we try to solve problems without looking at the cause of the problem, we end up practicing, or rather engaging in activities of, non-productivity. What do you think the problem is that causes such high levels of unemployment?
Thank you for asking it, because first aid and treating symptoms is creating tomorrow's problems. We are just delaying the imminent. Let me take you back to, I'm 52 years young.
Okay.
By the way, I'm still studying my PhD. All right. In my era, when in 94 I graduated, the tenure of acquisition of a degree was 3 years, which is still the 3 or 4 years. Are you getting it?
Yes.
So the knowledge acquisition was 3 years. And the monetization of that knowledge or a degree was 20 years. Are you getting it?
Yeah.
So it was 7x or 8x. You acquire something and you monetize it. So the currency or tenancy or tenure or relevance of a particular skill or a degree was much longer. Now, fast forward today, in a bite-sized, real-time VUCA world, acquisition of skill is bite-sized and on real-time. And monetization is probably weeks or a quarter or two. Then you have to unlearn and again go to the next skill.
Yeah.
So let's get this paradigm settled in first. You asked about the root cause. So in a very fast-paced change economy or ecosystem or the world, the relevance of knowledge is not there. And quite often, redundant knowledge is more dangerous than no knowledge. Because there is an investment to unlearn, to get to the ground zero. We have to plow the field, isn't it, to be ready.
Right.
So in the fresh field, you don't have to as much. In the weeded field with the weed, we need to plow more. Are you getting it? So unlearn, ground zero, upskill, monetize. And the cycle goes, repeat. Yet I'm telling you, the experience and maturity that comes with handling life situations also help you somewhere. So I'm not totally discounting the oldies. Are you getting it?
Yeah.
So the root cause of unemployment, number one, like they say, the chief cause of divorce is what?
Marriage.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So the root cause of unemployment is the earth, according to me, I'm not quoting anybody, earth, according to me, is configured for 4 or 5 billion people. We are 8 billion. Now you'll ask me scientific basis, I don't have any. I'm just saying, we are just too many people and too few resources. We're dominating ecosystem, other animal system and resource, and we are abusing it. So the root cause is population. Now, it's too cruel to say that you were born and you're part of that excess population. No. So it's too cruel to say. We have to handle this. Get it? So number one, root cause is population, which is beyond our control. So let's not deal with that. Second is employment is about value. In the ruthless market, perfect market condition, value finds opportunity. The value finds opportunity. Opportunity would go, capital would go to where value is provided. Now, as an educated graduate, I would feel I offer value, but you just have potential. It's not converted into a delivered value yet. Now, we are facing this conundrum and diabolic situation where on one side, and I am on I pay the tax of knowing the both sides. I was a dean of a B school in 2004 to 2004, where my biggest role was to place my MBAs. And I also been the head of HR, recruiting people, and also CEO of a company where I don't find talent that I want.
Why?
Exactly. So now the root cause is the dissync between what is required and what is generated. At least at the base level, at entry level jobs, it is perpetuating throughout. So there are two norms in HR we have: the time to fill a vacancy. Now imagine time to fill a vacancy, even at entry level job, is higher than what we would hope for when there are thousands of unemployed. So, and if you really run that data, it would be not less than 2 months or 1.5 months to fill that vacancy, even at entry level. Second is speed to productivity in HR lingo. Speed to productivity means we get you as a producer of a show or a host of a show, even if you were fitting the job description. But when do you reach the peak performance or the expected performance level? Because there is a familiarity curve, there is a learning curve, there is adjustment to the culture, ethos and all. So these two metrics show that there is a gap. Do you think in ideal world the gap would not be there? Yes, the ideal world, the gap will always be there. But we have a woefully big and unaddressable gap where we are over-educating. And being an educator myself, I want to tell you, we educate to the ideal situations. In the best and next practices studies that we do, the youth that come out are disillusioned when they see the real life, which is imperfect. So our education should mirror best, next, and also should have reality. Then you don't over-educate. Secondly, I want to take you to another concept. See, you asked me a very difficult and a deep question, so allow me.
Okay.
The world is moving today to dumbed down versions. You know what is second scrolling. The producers are told today, make your programs and movies and series to a very dumbed down level.
Yeah.
Because everybody is second scrolling. They're doing other things. They're multitasking.
While they're watching.
Yeah.
So that you can get the idea even if you're not focusing.
Correct. And I have learned to enjoy a movie, contradicting to what my wife, she would go slice and dice and think 3 days about that movie. And I have learned to enjoy a movie without knowing the exact cause and move on. I am vaguely right and not precisely wrong. That's my mantra in life. I get it. Otherwise, you can't move on in this fuzzy life. So what is happening now? We're over-educating. In an era of distraction, the currency or the life size of the lifetime of knowledge is not that longer because there are just too many things happening. And we have atom bomb loading into a graduate, and then they are thrown to the market, and the pace of change so there's always a gap. Now, what we need, and the root cause is over-educating, not having gaps between education, work. It should interlap. I think graduation should be an 8 years degree where you have work coming very. And the root cause or mother of all cause, if you have educated unemployment, is the fulcrum and the leverage point, what I'm talking about. The society will change when we work on two people, two categories of people, the head teacher and the teacher. The head teacher engages the teacher. And if the head teachers don't have that mind space to tap into the engagement of the teacher, we will lose it. Secondly, how many of our professors and teachers have worked, at least in vocational courses, so that they can embark and give that version. So when society accords a very high respect and pay and attention to teachers, that change would happen. So I'm all over the place, but I'll summarize. The issue is dangerously, woefully critical. Our current supply side of labor or talent, what we should call, is redundant. It is decades, and the world is newer generation. So you can't have decades solution for tomorrow's world.
And even we'll add that there is, I remember there's a time I had a conversation with someone in the tech field, and the question that many have been asking is tech and AI coming to replace humans? And the gentleman said, it will only replace those who have not prepared themselves to embrace AI and tech. Those who will jump on it will manage to survive in the current ecosystem because they will know how to maneuver themselves around it. And you've mentioned about the need to change the teacher and the head teacher, which then brings the conversation in terms of, if we want solutions for tomorrow, not even for today, we want tomorrow's solutions, that would mean we need to recalibrate our education system and start offering solutions at a very young age. Is that the way to go?
You made 2 points. One of them is those who leverage tech would be having a better chance than those who do not leverage tech.
Yes.
Correct. As Vimal Shah of Bidco keeps saying that you ride the tiger, either you be lunch or if you eat lunch or be lunch. Yeah. And the Canadian premier at Davos said that if you're not on the table, you are on the menu. If you're not on the table, you're on the menu. So I would like to take those two things onto tech. If you're not riding the tech tiger, you're on the menu to eat, to be eaten up. So that's number one. Secondly, yes, the second point you made is about education. Yes, it has to be relevant. It has to be bite-sized. I think the whole concept of college is redundant. Skill. If you want to generate mass employment, we need skills. And the skills need practice, repetition. Okay. And also we can't oversell and we can't overload. So we need to tone down the education towards the work requirement. I don't subscribe to the concept of under-education, underemployment.
So into what systems does this plug? Because I want to look at the larger picture up here. So if we're saying tone down the education and increase the worker mass so that you have people who are skilled doing jobs. And I think about the different countries, Germany, Canada, the United States, the UK, France, who are calling for skilled workers. They're thinking about this. And that's because that they have an already existent system that requires those skills, whether it is in healthcare, whether it is in IT and manufacturing, whether it is in education, whether it is, across board. So the systems exist where those skills then are required for individuals to come and plug in. So if you're in an ecosystem whereby the system maybe is hobnobbing its way along and doesn't actually quite then have, the resources, the funding to set up that, are we working at cross purposes here when we're saying tone down the education, have people skilled? Because the TVETs could give way to what you're saying in Kenya, for example.
Exactly. I meant that.
You meant that. But where are they going after that? If there is no resultant system, whereby, for example, all the health workers that are needed in this country are absorbed by TVETs that are training clinical officers and or nurses. Right now, we have a problem whereby the number of doctors you need cannot be hired because there are not enough funds. You might need, you might need laborers, and I'm not going to call them casual, plumbers, masons, electricians, for whose skills are required. We don't want people who are half-baked as electricians putting up systems in buildings. We've seen what happened. January, 2 buildings have fallen down or have collapsed already. You see what I'm saying? So which direction are we working from? Have the system set up or start with the education?
I think such a huge and critical problem doesn't have one solution. It has a systemic. It needs a systemic approach all around. Number one, Kenya is producing 60,000 odd graduates, and a multiple of that in terms of diploma and certificate and all. And in tech economy, we have 1.2 million Kenyans, with roughly probably 2.5% of population into gig economy. They are working. Now, I see a system that is evolving wherein your frustration of engaging an unknown fundi, getting predictable desired outcome is huge, correct? We rarely have that experience which is psychologically and actually good when we engage a masoner or a plumber or a furniture guy or a mechanic. Yet, trust me, across the country in Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya, Ethiopia, I've met the roof sheet fixers, okay, Anatai or Fundis, and they are looking for job. So I would see tech would solve that problem by giving predictable behavior, by subsuming them under their umbrella. And you have a plumber on call, there are standards, so you have assured services.
Yeah.
Now that plumber, and the plumber doesn't have ID, and your company needs a receipt and a tax, ITIM, what we call here, right?
Yeah. Yes.
We need that, right? But that the company will give. So these ecosystems, such ecosystems will generate employment for long. What happened with Uber and Bolt? A random taxi driver now has a formal. So these ecosystems would consume a lot of such people. Forget it. I am saying a Kenyan Uber version for laborers would serve on tap, real time, to European markets. They may have benching staff sitting somewhere, and they would be serving that. So we may become the vocational supplier of the world, okay, which is nice,
Which is also acceptable.
which is fine. I tell you.
Yeah.
See, I think value determines. A truck driver in Canada is paid much more than a doctor is.
This is true.
Okay, so value with the. But that also, the naysayers say that robots will take over blue-collar jobs even in the next 3 or 4 years. We don't know. Okay, I am not looking at much far in the, which is difficult to see how it will evolve. So, vocational is the way to go. It's a holy grail for now. Okay, and also we all sit in these glass chambers in the urban cities. What about rural? Where boss, you are sitting in Kenya, which is an epitome of entrepreneurship tech. Go around and see the maturity of human capital, the professional levels, the tech systems, the government systems. They're not as good. Okay, so and then go remote. What is happening? So we have to come out with tech solutions which are resilient even in the remote satellite areas, operating through USSB if there is no smartphone. I mean USSD, like the M-Pesa works. Okay, back in 2007, I used to pay my casual workers up country daily through M-Pesa, a part of the wage. So it's possible. So work is the way to go. Aggregators using tech and entrepreneurs would be a bridge towards the formal and informal to give a predictable solution. Mass exodus of human capital to serve the other market, to me, is a great thing. I am not a fan of people who worry about brain drain. Let the A class of Africa go and show the rest of the world the goodness of Africa. FIFA had Africa, isn't it?
Yeah.
The FIFA France team are all Africans. So the goodness of Africa is shared. Okay, talent will go where opportunity and enabling systems are there. And if we try to curb being socialist, no, let them go. If you curb talent, is the biggest crime. Okay, I am a fan of Ayn Rand and those times. You have to let talent go. Let's make our B and B minus team so good that it serves our purposes. Imagine your cousin going to Germany, doing something, and coming back every year and telling you the stories would uplift the whole family of 16, 17 cousins in aspirational level, get you some euros, foreign exchange, enable you to travel there. And Africa needs to go outward.
Yeah. So with all these, and especially the conversation around tech, there is something that is critical as a community that we must do. And that is, we must change the culture. Culture change is a reality that must change if many are to tap on the goodness that tech comes in with. And for a very long time, there are those who say, I'll just go to school, after that I will look for a job and I will get in. If you don't change the culture and understand that we have tech and you're required to have more skills, that instead of waiting for a white collar job, you can get into blue collar job and you will still win. So how critical is it for us as a people to change our mindset and appreciate that times have changed and we must change with it?
Thank you for raising this question. I think compared to the millennials of the rest of the world, and I have the benefit to see all the three worlds, African youth is still better. It gives me immense hope and inspiration to come back to Africa. As far our youths are much better than the entitled woke of the other people. See what has happened now. You need to do hustle that you don't love in order to enable you to do hustle later on that you love.
Okay.
You have to kiss a lot of toads before you get your prince or princess. You understand? So what I'm trying to say is, that's the pyramid of maturity. One need to. So the culture part is also dominated by a very big phenomenon that we need to understand. In my age, I used to queue up at library and I used to ask other people, can I use because a library would I had 4 library memberships.
Yeah.
And one library card in a monologue, in a paper economy, would give you 2 books. Then I used to I used to beg others
To give you.
to give their books to me. Now imagine we moved from an age of absence of information to an excess of information. Okay, today information, knowledge, books, everything is available at the fingertip. But information has exploded, but curiosity is imploded.
Yeah.
Do we find this curiosity anywhere? So the hunger for knowledge is imploded, it's broken down.
Yeah.
So that phenomenon has to be taken in our stride when we set this culture or work ethos. I think when people embed in themselves that just because Bhavesh is vegetarian, okay, I'm a vegetarian born, and if I am caught in Masai Mara by a Simba, the Simba would not say he's vegetarian, I'll not eat him. He will still eat me, or it will still eat me, right? So just because I'm educated, somebody will employ me. No. What value I bring on table, how speedily I do it, and if I am not there, I start here. If I am not directly getting a suit and tie job, I start with a quasi, semi, and then rise up. That culture change has to come. And I think that would be driven the moment the umbrella of protection is exposed and when the hunger strikes. 33% of people take it easily.
Okay, so what I hear you advocating for then is still an element of hard work that you must sweat at the brow in order to get ahead. It would appear as though the technological age in which we are currently in, those who might imagine that you don't have to struggle too hard to get something done, those seem to be at crosswinds as well. So we are advocating for still hard work and sweat in a world whereby it's saying at the moment, well, you don't need to struggle so much. Are we leaving one behind and embracing the other? Or is there a marriage of the two?
That's the confusion of the two. And we have to ride this chaos. One wants to work smart. One wants to work less. But one has to work. I'm not saying toil. Work smart, but show up on time. Be ready and receptive. Throw those attitudes that make the job giver or the managers want to give you job rather than resist mentally. So my biggest thing at startup talks at most of the conferences, I say wake up and show up before you start up. Opportunity would go to readiness. and given three choices between three youth whom I want to give, I would go one. The work will go to one which is more ready, more curious, more hunger, and that attitude is the proclivity is demonstrated. So yes, we live in a very, very, very fuzzy and diabolical world today, and the trends are dangerously annoying. With this entitlement, less work versus the expectation and desires. Okay.
So one then asks the question, with the need for one to work hard, the need for one to push to push the wheel and continue to reinventing themselves, do we then see a youthful population that is hungry for work? Are we seeing a youthful population that wants to hustle, wants to wade the muddy waters before making it? Or are we seeing a population that is also a microwave generation?
I think 1/3 is the one that you described first. They're ready to dirty their hands. I use a beautiful statement, muddle in the mud. Yeah, they are ready, I think. 1/3 are woefully entitled and let the job come to me on a ready-made platter and entitled and all. They might be talented in both the cases. And others could be a bit of both. So I am seeing all kind, but I'm delighted I've created graduate trainee programs for now 15 to 20 years. I've created internships which are win-win deals. In Ethiopia, if you give an employment, there comes a lot of legal tie-ups in an organization. It becomes a fixed cost. I've innovated ways whereby I've enabled youth to get business licenses of data translations and data processing, and then they provide the services to us. And then the made micro entrepreneurs, then they can also scout work from 2 or 3 organizations and then coach them, train them, and get them to a predictable level. So a lot depends on what is your planned intention. To me, the holy grail is internships. What we call earlier in 2 decades back in Kenya was attachments. I don't know what they are called now. But a meaningful way. I would want in every team of attachment to be deployed at a company along with one professor and teacher. What happens when I am learning something and I go to a company and I learn something else? I am disillusioned because I've taught best and next practices and the reality is little less. I have to wait at the reception 4 hours for HR to first meet me. Are you getting it? Which is reality of so. And B is when they learn new things and go back to the school, the teachers don't know that they have moved on and they've learned. So I would want one teacher with a dozen of students to go for attachment, if not every day, once a week. Now, is our policies and government policies and academic policies allowing that? Their first question comes, what about my food allowance? What about my transport allowance? Blah, blah, blah. All those things are restrictive. Are you getting it? So we far from there. Yet we are doing, each country is doing internships, each country is doing attachment, and it has a value. We had a program unleashed in 2004, 5, 6 at BIDCO where we used to get world's MBAs to work on a special pass for a couple of months over here, and some local students who will rub shoulders with them and they'll solve problems. At Safal Group, we had graduate training programs in 14, 15. I was in charge across 7, 8 countries, and many of our graduate trainees have reached a management level, fast forward 10, 12, with an intention plan of a talent accelerated learning path. So it's possible. Corporates employ a fraction of the labor supply, and we don't expect them to employ all. And that's where the entrepreneurship should come. We should have more courses coming out teaching them entrepreneurship. What is entrepreneurship? Taking risk, providing value. Providing value is a core, solving problems. Okay, that are the 3 cornerstones of entrepreneurship. But we want safety. We want assured salary. And we want to demand salary before somebody assesses you on your value. Typically, a salaried person should provide 3x to the company, minimum, of the value. Now, where is that prism ever used? Secondly, everybody wants to start a unicorn. A brilliant, mind-blowing idea which is not there. No! Just do even what is templated. Be a plumber with a better service, with a better reputation. Be a nurse with a better empathy. Be a physiotherapist with a better whatever. A mechanic with a reputation.
So you don't have to. What you're saying is that in this entrepreneurship world, because obviously it's the private sector that grows economies across countries. It's not government. 'Cause the government has a role to play in making sure that this happens. But if we look at the economies of the world, largely grown by private sector. And we are saying that in order for the private sector to grow, certain things need to happen. That environments have to be conducive for certain things to occur. If a young person, 25, 24 years old, is setting up a business, there's certain things that need to be done. But what I hear you saying is that you don't necessarily need to have something new, groundbreaking something, but that you just need to do better at the thing that maybe other people have been doing.
Exactly, and that's where the mass employment of self-employment would come in. Do you think everybody is genius? You follow the bell curve. 0.04 or 0.03% of people would probably make it to the genius level. Others are commoners. So commoners have to do common things in an uncommonly great way. Improving 1% in 100 people is much more rewarding than improving 100% in one person. Are you getting it? That's one. Now you asked a very important role. Government in Kenya's ecosystem for it to thrive needs to provide few things as an enabling policy. The need of the hour today is to have predictable service, right? You give an advance to a plumber and it doesn't show up, what happens? You hire. So what we need to have is KYC norms, that there is a government policy, the government person is registered and we can retrieve him or her. Secondly, there is one insurance scheme which is covered, which can protect the customer who pays advance. Third, is there a legal immunity available if a contract falls apart? Because the contracts are now being done with tiny micro entrepreneurs. And if a organized body wants to contract many tiny ones, then they want ATMs, they want fallback, they want KYC, they want referrals. So those kind of enabling systems is where the policymakers need to provide so that the services are rendered as expected without fear.
Okay. So as that happens, do we then see an almost automatic resultant effect? If this happens, what do we see then? Across board, people with businesses growing, thriving, flourishing?
One more thing government needs to do, I'll answer this question, is also provide microfinance or credit. We need to lubricate the economy. If you look at India's Mudra scheme, it gave without guarantee to, I guess, millions of people, $750 to $1,500, and they started small kiosks, duka, this, that, and guess what? 94 to 96 or 97% of people are paying back. Okay. The problem is when the big people, the big giants default, not the small ones. Okay. They have a good character to pay. So that was one more credit that we need to give. How would that result? See, what happens, self-employment is the holy grail in the whole situation.
Yes.
Okay. And every self-employed person, directly or indirectly, employs one or 1.5 or 2 another people. So I organized job sector is going to shrink with tech coming. Quasi vocational sector is going to boom, and that's where the micro entrepreneurs with the enabling government system would keep our society rolling rather than falling apart. That is the holy grail, and we need to have systems, we need to have policies, we need to have there should be an absence of deterrence. Okay, we want formal economy for tax compliance. I agree with you, but then there are these institutes like Uber who's got so many people subsumed under them, and there you get receipts. So similar such other institutes. We should have Jumias and Ubers for plumbers. I saw one of them, I was looking up while preparing for this. There is a couple of things for Tire Safe, and there are some other. So they should evolve more and more. Even farming. There's enough scope for the value chain of the goods that would move, and a little more entrepreneurs in that space.
Kenya specific, do you see the things that you advocate for actually happening? Or are there steps towards something like that? Because at the moment, it just seems like there are many moving parts, but not coming together as the vehicle that is required then to move this.
Being a confirmed optimist, I have very high levels of expectations with all African governments. So I generally expect more, talk more about what I expect, and I'm also realist that a year can be slipped between talk and walk. All right,
Or more.
or more,
Or 10 years.
So I think in the direction wise, we're moving in right direction. Degree wise, there's definitely always, not only for Kenya, for all of the world, there's always a 20% upside up for the grabs. I'm not aware of the recent trends and the recent things that, because I live in Ethiopia, I watch Kenya closely. Yes, any change is painful, and when you want to deliver painful change, I believe an engagement, a proper change management engagement. People support what they help create.
Yes.
Is my mantra of change. And the change transcends across individual, societal, and systematic realms. Okay, all the three. So we need to deploy all the threes.
Yeah, one would ask the question then, for entrepreneurs to be able to start the business and do well, there has to be assistance in the sense of easy business doing it, and a good environment for doing business, government incentivizing these entrepreneurs in the jobs that they are doing, that if someone is coming up with an idea, government does not sit only as the person who takes the taxes, but an enabler in enabling this individual and the business to grow. Are we seeing governments that are holding hands of entrepreneurs and working with them the journey? Because one would also say that government has a lot of individuals who would give advice and guidance to upcoming entrepreneurs. Are we seeing governments do that, or is it just to entrepreneurs to do their thing and move?
I don't think the advice that government probably would provide would be more relevant. People who don't, how can you have a business teacher or a professor who's not done business? You fail before you start. So I don't take that. Government A doesn't have to be a roadblock, if not enabler.
Yes.
B, I told you already, if there is a credit system available, it's a verified tag available kind of thing, a recourse to a person, identification for a service is not provided, a fast track courts for commercial disputes, fast track, I mean to say, easy, maybe microfinance available to them, and an insurance scheme of assurance of services of some kind can be crystallized, incentivizing organizations for giving youth and a first opportunity of a job, tax breaks or something like that, which is there in certain forms, but can it be more effective? What else can government do in this, frankly?
If government bureaucracies, for example, are cut down to the minimum, what would that do then to entrepreneurs?
I agree, but I see, I'm not a student, or I am not studied what is the level which is ideal and what would be in Kenyan context. But definitely bureaucracy is a bad word, but then bureaucracy also gives a robust structure to the fluidity and other things. So what is the right balance? I'll take another 3 months to observe and check. I wanted you to consider that the holy grail of Kenyan maturity, employment, entrepreneurship, and tech, and up for grab immediately, is the regional play. Kenya surpasses the neighbors in the sophistication of human capital, tech entrepreneurship, and other maturity. You can feel it. You know, when you walk into Kenya, the sophistication relative to the region jumps out and it's visible to impress you. The Caribou is so natural, so beautiful. So I want Kenya to leverage regional first. Okay.
Leverage regionally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have East Africa as a market. Soon we'll have Africa free trade, and Kenya can be having a head start, a low-hanging fruit. Secondly, soft power.
Yes.
I was watching this Shadow Scholars documentary. I want all of you to watch it. The Shadow Scholars documentary was released a year back about this huge Kenyan scholars who are doing homeworks and writing theses and research work for the rest of the world at peanuts. So there is a competence, there is a market, and they have formalized by call that contract essays or contract cheating, whatever it is. But it's working. So if we are creating theses and researches of the rest of the world, that means we have it in us. Are you getting it?
Yes.
Now idea is to find how do we get from low paid to a sufficiently paid value chain. Secondly, soft power. If Kenyan runners are so nice, why is the rest of the world not setting up through a G2G or any way combination a stadium each for each country, and they come here 3 months and practice because our weather, our climate is so beautiful. And when they come here and practice, they'll need the ecosystem, they'll bring in dollars, they'll need the lawyers, nurses, trainers to support, it'll generate employment. Why are we not leveraging it? Why are we not thinking about it? Our music, our culture, our weather is so beautiful. The way we create content, why are we not having the Las Vegas